Episode 409 is similar to episode 209, the Blackwater episode, in that it's contained to one location, one night. That said, it's much more involved than Blackwater was.
After we saw how well Blackwater had come out, we thought it would be great to get Neil Marshall back when we eventually have the battle at the wall. The whole episode, not the whole episode, but I guess 15 minutes into it, it becomes a battle, and it's easy to get a little bit monotonous if it's just guys charging at each other for 45 minutes straight. And so part of the challenge is trying to find these little moments that will stand out on their own, and the big challenge is just finding time to do everything, because there's so many action beats that you want, and the action beats are always the slowest to get right, or take the most time intensive, and it was all night shoots like Blackwater. So there are certainly some similarities.
Our vows never specifically forbid intimate relations with women.
What? I shall take no wife. Yes, that's in there. There's no denying that. I shall father no children. It's very specific. But what our vows have to say about other activities is open to interpretation.
Sam is a very literary fellow, and he's given a lot of attention to the vows, and he's not quite sure that the vows mean what everyone interprets them to mean, because after all, there's nothing specific in the vows that says you can't lie with the woman. It just says, you know, you can't father any children. But there's also a bit of hypocrisy to it, because Brothers of the Night's Watch have been going to the Molestown brothel forever, and that's why there is a Molestown brothel. From Sam's point of view, he's in love with this girl Gilly, and what's wrong with that? As long as he continues to maintain his vows, as they're literally stated, then he's not actually betraying the Night's Watch. John's not quite so sure that anyone sees it that way, and as he says, I don't think Sir Alistair was really much for interpretation. It's just fun to see those two guys together, you know, whenever possible. It's kind of the quiet before the storm scene, and there are a few of those scenes that we really love.
I am a man of the Night's Watch, Gilly. I made a promise to defend the wall, and I have to keep it. Because that's what men do.
There is a sort of native sense of honor to him, not necessarily in the Jon Snow heroic mode. Sam is absolutely petrified, but he knows he has to do that, and as he says, you know, this is, I've made an oath, and this is what men do, and he's not going to betray his brothers by staying down there and avoiding the fight.
They held the gate.
This episode is a regular slaughterhouse where, yeah, we're killing off a few favorites. Gren goes out again with great heroism. That him and his small party face off against a giant. Although they lose, they do kill the giant as well, so they do save the day and protect the gateway to Castle Black and the south. They do a very noble deed.
This battle is one that we've been planning for a long time, and we have these actors that we love, Joseph Alton as Pip and Mark Stanley as Gren, and while neither of the characters die in the books, it felt like we had to have some casualties amongst the people that we really care about here. We decided it should be Gren, because Gren's someone we've seen from quite nearly the very beginning of the series, and he's always been around. He's quite loyal and steadfast. We knew that people would care about him, you know, down there. And it's a great scene, and we love seeing him really take command in his final moments and stir his comrades to courage, you know, reciting their vows, and you know, the tunnel scene worked out beautifully.
I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch, for this night and all the nights to come! Archers! Knock your arrows! Knock arrows!
John, as well, has to go through some major heartbreak, but at the same time, he's stepping up to leadership when it's needed. When things are at their worst, people are at their best, and he certainly steps up to the cause.
You have the wall!
Obviously, Kit's the center of this episode. He's the centerpiece of the episode. Watching him assume the mantle of authority without particularly wanting to assume the mantle of authority. There was one scene I remember watching, and we said, rewind. There's somebody put that weird speed up, you know, like a speed ramp on Kit's sword move there, and it looks fake, it looks too fast. Could we fix whatever somebody did to that shot? And Chris, the visual effects editor, looked at it and he said, there's no speed ramp on this shot. Like, that's the speed at which he's moving with this big, heavy aluminum sword. It's very rare to find somebody who both has the acting chops that Kit has and the ability to say so much in such a subtle way. He's an action hero. When Ygritte sees Jon, who she's talked about killing many, many times over the course of this season, she hesitates.
It harks back to the first episode of the season where Tormund says, I've seen you slip a shaft through a rabbit's eye or a fawn's eye from 400 yards. She's kind of a prodigy with the bow, and she had a fairly close shot at Jon Snow at the end of season 3. As much as she feels betrayed by Jon and as much fury as she feels, there's also real love there. She has the opportunity here in the courtyard, and she doesn't take it.
Obviously, we have a major moment in this episode with the loss of the Greek. So we did the kind of build up to it, but I knew I didn't want to get into that particular scene until, it needed to be fresh. It needed a new day to get into that, because it's going to be emotional, it's going to be tough.
Rose Leslie is such a wonderful actress. From the first time we saw her, I was watching a Downton Abbey episode and watching this actress and thinking, she'd be a really good Ygritte. And then to see that final shot, which we told Neil Marshall, one of our favorite shots of the series, and we very, very rarely do slow motion. We don't like slow motion. It tends to feel self-conscious to us and a little bit cheesy, but this one shot we loved so much there was no way, when we saw it in the director's cut that Neil had put it in slow, we loved it.
The shot of Jon cradling Ygritte in his arms is my favorite shot of the episode. It just completely brings you into Jon's consciousness, and you're experiencing this moment as he's experiencing it, as something, the worst thing that could possibly happen, stretched out over time longer than you could ever imagine. And it's beautiful and heartbreaking.
You remember that, Kay? You should have stayed in that cave.
I think the idea that Ygritte is gone from the world is almost as difficult for Jon as the idea that Rose Leslie is no longer on the show is difficult for us.
We'll go back there.